All right, so today we're diving deep into the world of Giorgian De Arrascaeta.
So that's right.
And we're really going beyond the typical soccer stats.
Oh, absolutely.
We've got this amazing interview that he recently did with globoesport.com.
Oh, yeah.
And it really gives us a chance to kind of peek behind the curtain, see what makes him tick.
Absolutely.
So we're going to look at his evolution as a player, but also, his personal evolution as well.
Absolutely. A chance to really see the man behind the player. And it's fascinating, too, because there are some really interesting twists in his journey.
Yeah, for sure. There are a few things that honestly surprise me.
Yeah, there's some unexpected elements.
So we'll touch on things like his struggles with leadership, believe it or not.
Yeah, not what you'd expect from such a dominant player on the field.
Exactly. And we'll also delve into the whole culture shock he experienced going from Uruguay to Brazil.
Right. Two very different worlds, even though they're geographically close.
Huge difference. And then, get this, we'll even discuss how therapy has played a part in his journey.
It's not something you hear athletes talk about often, but it's really refreshing to see his openness about it.
It is. It's really great. Okay, so let's go back to the beginning. Let's talk about his arrival in Brazil. It couldn't have been easy, coming from a small town in Uruguay to this whole new world of Brazilian soccer.
No, it's a massive leap.
Yeah.
Imagine going from a town of just 3,000 people.
Wow.
To the hustle and bustle of Brazilian soccer, the intensity, the pressure, especially at such a young age, it's a huge adjustment, both on and off the field.
Yeah, and it's not just the soccer, right? It's the
Yeah.
entire culture. He talked about how different the pace of life is, even just like the social scene.
Right, he mentioned something about barbecues.
Exactly. He said that in Brazil, people are always ready to have a barbecue. Like, it's so spontaneous.
Oh, yeah. Anytime, anywhere, it's a way of life.
But in Uruguay, it's much more planned, much more of a, like a formal event almost.
Yeah, a little more structured, less impromptu.
Right. And it's interesting, right? Like even those little things like barbecues can highlight these big cultural differences.
It's true. They give you a glimpse into the values, the priorities, the way people interact with each other. And those differences can definitely make it harder to adjust when you're moving to a new place trying to find your footing.
Totally. Okay, so let's shift gears a bit and talk about something that I found really surprising. His struggles with leadership.
Yeah, that is a bit unexpected, isn't it?
I mean, on the field, he's clearly a leader.
Oh, he's a maestro, orchestrating the game, dictating the tempo, creating chances.
Exactly. But off the field, early on, he was really reserved.
Right. Almost shy, some might say. Do you think that his style of play as this creative playmaker might have something to do with that initial quietness off the field?
Oh, that's a good question. It's possible. Maybe being so focused on orchestrating the game, on seeing those passes that others don't see, leads to a more internal, introspective kind of personality.
Yeah, it could be. Remember what Thiago Neves said about Arrascaeta's shyness when they played together?
I do. Those comments were pretty controversial at the time.
Well, they were. Some people thought Neves was being dismissive. But looking back, they seem quite insightful.
They do, because even Arrascaeta himself admits that he struggled to be vocal even when he felt strongly about something as a leader.
It's a struggle many people can relate to, especially those in leadership positions. And that makes his openness about seeking therapy, at his wife's suggestion, even more remarkable.
It does, because it's not something you hear a lot about in professional sports, is it?
No, not really. There's often a stigma attached to it, this idea that athletes need to be tough, to just push through any mental struggles.
Right, like showing vulnerability is a sign of weakness.
But Arrascaeta is being really honest and courageous in sharing his experience.
He is, and he gave a specific example of how therapy helped them. He said that he used to retreat after losses, just isolate himself.
That's understandable. The pressure to perform at that level is immense. It's easy to internalize those setbacks.
But now he says he focuses on giving his best, regardless of the outcome.
That's a huge shift in mindset. It shows a real maturity, a resilience that goes beyond just physical ability.
It really does. And it highlights how important it is for athletes to have that mental and emotional support to address those internal struggles.
Absolutely. It's just as important as physical training and conditioning.
Okay, so we've talked about his arrival in Brazil, his struggles with leadership, and his decision to seek therapy. But let's not forget the magic he creates on the pitch. How do you think his playing style has evolved over the years? I'm particularly curious about the impact of his time playing under Marcelo Bielsa for Uruguay.
Bielsa. A fascinating and demanding coach.
To say the least.
His system is all about intensity, Constant movement, pressing, attacking. It's relentless.
And Arrascaeta even recalled Bielsa saying that even a legend like Juan Riquelme wouldn't fit in his system.
Wow, that's a bold statement. Riquelme was a master of controlling the tempo, of dictating the flow of the game. But he wasn't known for his defensive work rate.
Not exactly. And Arrascaeta even joked about feeling doomed after hearing that Riquelme comment.
Haha, I can imagine. So how do you think this experience under Bielsa, with his high-octane style, shaped Arrascaeta's game? Especially when you contrast it with the more measured approach he often takes at Flamengo.
It's a great question. It must have been a real pressure cooker playing for Bielsa.
No doubt.
But Arrascaeta did talk about a goal he scored against Palmeiras and how Bielsa's coaching had influenced his positioning.
Interesting. So even though Bielsa's system is very different from the way Flamengo plays, he still absorbed those lessons.
It seems like it. And that speaks to his adaptability, his willingness to learn and grow, even when he's already at such a high level.
Absolutely. That's a hallmark of truly great players, that constant desire to evolve and refine their craft.
It brings us to another interesting question. Why do you think his performance sometimes seems to differ between Flamengo and the national team?
It's a question that a lot of people have. And he actually addressed it head on in the interview.
He did. And he was pretty frank about it, wasn't he?
He was. He said that the Uruguayan national team's tactical setup doesn't always play to his strengths. They often play a more defensive style.
Right. And that requires him to be more defensively involved, which is not his natural game.
It isn't. He even joked about how much running he has to do for Uruguay. He said something about it being the death of him.
Classic Arrascaeta. Always finding a way to inject some humor.
But even though he's playing a different role for the national team, there's no sense of complaint from him, just an honest assessment of the situation.
Yeah. And that self-awareness is really impressive. He's not making excuses. He's just analyzing and adapting to what's required of him in different contexts.
And that's a valuable quality, both on and off the field. The ability to recognize your strengths, but also your limitations, and to adapt accordingly.
Exactly. Okay, so we've talked about his tactical evolution and his self-awareness. But let's not forget that moment after winning the 2022 Copa do Brazil. Remember how emotional he was? Playing through that painful injury, those tears were a powerful statement of loyalty.
It was a truly remarkable moment. He could have easily sat out, but he chose to play through the pain.
It speaks volumes about his commitment to Flamengo, his dedication to his teammates, and his love for the game.
Absolutely. And it's clear that he has a deep connection with the club and its fans. They adore him.
They do. Speaking of his future, now that Gabigol has left Flamengo, what do you think Arrascaeta's aspirations are?
Well, his agent mentioned a possible move to Peñarol.
Right, his childhood club. But from what Arrascaeta said in the interview, it sounds like his heart is set on retiring at Flamengo.
He did talk about how special the Mundo Flamengo is. He said it's not just a team, it's a feeling. And he couldn't even really explain it.
Yeah, he was struggling to find the words. It's like this intangible thing that goes beyond just the soccer.
Right, it's the passion of the fans, the history of the club, the sense of community. It's something you have to experience to truly understand.
It seems like he's found a real sense of belonging there. And that's really beautiful to see.
It is, and it makes you wonder, how will his role within that Mundo Flamengo evolve as his playing career winds down?
That's a great question, and one we'll definitely explore further. But first, let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
Yeah, it really does make you wonder, what drives a player like Arrascaeta, someone who's already achieved so much at such a young age?
Yeah, what keeps him motivated? What are his goals now?
Well, and thinking about that, I keep coming back to his comments about that Mundo Flamengo thing.
Right.
Like he couldn't really explain it, you know?
I couldn't put it into words, yeah.
It was more of a feeling.
A feeling of belonging.
Being part of something bigger than himself.
Exactly. And it seems like that feeling, that connection, is a big part of what motivates him.
Right. And it's not just about the present. It seems like he's already thinking about how he can keep contributing to that world even after he's done playing.
Yeah, he's thinking long term.
Which brings us back to those conversations he's been having with Matías Gonçalves.
Right. The young up-and-comer.
It's fascinating how he's taken on this kind of mentoring role.
While he's still, at the peak of his own career.
Exactly. He's not just focusing on himself. He's trying to give back to the club to help develop the next generation.
And it's not just about tactics either.
No, it goes deeper than that.
It's about instilling a certain mindset. you know?
Right. Encouraging Matthias to be more assertive, more hungry for goals and assists.
To really go after it.
And that kind of mentorship can be so valuable, especially for a young player who's still finding his way.
Yeah, it's not just about what to do on the field. It's about the mental approach, the attitude.
And it made me wonder, if coaching is something that Arrascaeta might consider down the line.
It's possible.
He did say in the interview that he didn't really see himself as a coach, but you never know. Things change. People evolve.
And even if he doesn't become a coach in the traditional sense, on the sidelines,
Right.
his insights, his leadership, those would be huge assets to Flamengo in any role.
Oh, absolutely.
He could be involved in player development, scouting, even shaping the club's overall strategy.
He's got a brilliant football mind.
He does.
And it's interesting to think about how his own leadership style has evolved over the years.
Yeah.
Because he was initially so reserved,
He was the quiet guy.
But now he's actively guiding and shaping the next generation of players.
It shows real growth.
It does, and it also shows a deep commitment to the future of Flamengo.
To building something lasting.
And leaving a legacy.
And speaking of his past, I thought it was really touching how he talked about his time at Cruzeiro.
Yeah, he clearly still has a lot of affection for the club and the fans there.
And that regret he expressed about not being able to say a proper goodbye.
It seems like it's something that still weighs on him.
He mentioned that he often talks to his friend, big Cruzeiro fan, right, about how much he wishes he could have had that proper farewell.
It shows a real depth of feeling, doesn't it?
It does.
He's not just moving from one club to the next, forgetting about the past.
These experiences matter to him.
The relationships he builds.
They stay with him.
It's a side of him we don't always see.
Right, the human side.
Behind the superstar.
Okay, but let's bring it back to Flamengo for a minute.
Yeah.
He's a legend there, no doubt about it.
Absolutely one of the greats.
But what keeps him going? What are his goals now?
Well, he talked about how winning the Copa do Brazil in 2022 was particularly emotional for him.
Right.
Because he was playing through that painful pubalgia injury.
I remember that.
He could have easily sat out.
He could have, but he didn't.
He chose to push through the pain.
It's incredible.
It really speaks volumes about his willpower, his love for the game, his dedication to Flamengo.
Yeah, and he said he could barely walk after matches.
I bet.
But he was still out there giving it everything.
It's the kind of thing that inspires fans, teammates, everyone.
It's true leadership.
And I think it also underscores his emphasis on professionalism and preparation.
Right. He's not just relying on talent.
He's putting in the work.
He's become even more focused on taking care of his body, doing everything he can to stay at the top of his game.
He understands that longevity at that level requires more than just natural ability.
It takes discipline,
hard work,
a willingness to adapt.
And he even talked about working with his psychologist to develop a healthier mindset.
Oh, interesting. Tell me more about that.
So it's not just about the physical side. He's also working on the mental side.
Right.
He wants to develop an approach that's not solely dependent on wins and losses.
Because that can be so up and down, right?
It can be really tough on your mental state.
So what's he focusing on instead?
He's focusing on the process, on giving his best every single day, regardless of the outcome.
That's a really sustainable approach, isn't it?
It is one that will serve him well, both on and off the field.
And it ties back to what we were talking about earlier. You know how therapy has helped him become a better leader? Exactly.
He's not just leading by example with his skills, he's leading by showing a healthy and balanced approach to the game itself.
It's a powerful message.
Especially in a sport that can be so intensely focused on results.
Win at all costs.
Right. But Arrascaeta is showing that it's okay to be vulnerable, to prioritize your mental well-being.
Just take care of yourself.
And that approach is clearly paying off.
It is. He's playing at an incredibly high level, even as he enters his 30s.
He's defying expectations.
Challenging those ideas about players inevitably declining after a certain age.
He's proving that age is just a number.
And he actually credits his wife with helping him find that balance.
Ah, that's sweet.
He calls her his right arm, his support system.
They seem like a great team.
They do. And he talked about how they make decisions together, support each other's goals, and work to create a life beyond soccer.
It's a reminder that success, in any area of life is often a team effort.
You need people you can rely on.
People who understand you.
I'll help you grow. It makes me think about how he described that Mundo Flamengo, that feeling of connection.
Yeah.
Do you think that sense of belonging also plays a part in his decision to stay in South America rather than pursuing a move to Europe?
It's a really interesting question, isn't it? Because he did say that he felt his style of play was better suited to South American soccer.
Right. He talked about how there might be more emphasis on creativity and technical skill there.
And maybe it's not just about the style of play, but also about the culture, the environment.
Yeah, maybe he feels more at home in South America.
And he mentioned that he wasn't sure if he was mentally prepared for the challenges of adapting to a new culture in Europe.
Right. It's a huge decision.
Moving to a different continent, leaving everything you know behind.
It's not something to be taken lightly.
And you have to admire him for being so honest about his feelings, about his doubts.
He's not afraid to be vulnerable.
And it seems like he's completely at peace with the decision he made.
Yeah, he's not second-guessing himself.
He's found a place where he feels comfortable, where he can express himself where he belongs.
And that seems to be more important to him than chasing a career in Europe.
It goes back to that idea of finding fulfillment beyond just the accolades and achievements.
It's about finding a place where you can truly be yourself.
Where you feel valued for who you are.
And I think that's what makes Arrascaeta's story so resonant.
It reminds us that there are different paths to success.
And that sometimes the most fulfilling path is the one that leads you to a place where you feel truly connected.
He's found that connection at Flamengo.
And it seems to be driving him in everything he does.
Both on and off the field.
And that brings us back to that question about his international career.
Right.
Why do you think some people have questioned his role with the Uruguayan national team?
Despite his incredible success at the club level.
It's an interesting one.
It is a bit of a puzzle. Yeah, it's a bit of a head scratcher, right?
Like you've got this amazing player who's dominant at his club.
A true star.
But then the question is, why hasn't he always been a guaranteed starter for Uruguay?
Yeah, it's something that people talk about.
And to his credit, he actually addressed this in the interview.
He did.
He was very upfront about it.
He didn't shy away from it.
So he basically explained that Uruguay's tactical setup, well, it doesn't always play to his strengths.
Right, they often play a more reactive style.
More defensive.
Yeah, a lot more defensive than what he's used to at Flamengo.
And that means he has to be more defensively involved.
Which isn't really his natural game.
Not at all.
It's not where he shines.
He even mentioned Diego Forlan.
Oh yeah, a legend for Uruguay.
As one of the few playmakers who really thrived in that system.
Right, Forlan had this incredible knack for finding space.
Yeah.
For making these incisive runs that could just unlock a defense.
He was so dangerous.
And it's a different kind of playmaking than what we see from Arrascaeta.
Right. Arrascaeta is more about controlling the tempo, picking out those killer passes.
Yeah, dictating the flow of the game.
Yeah. But even though he's not always a perfect fit for Uruguay's system,
right,
he's always shown this willingness to adapt.
To contribute however he can.
He's a team player.
Absolutely.
He's even talked about how he pushes himself defensively for Uruguay.
Covering more ground than he normally would at Flamengo.
And he does it with a sense of humor, too.
Oh, yeah. He's got that lighthearted side.
Remember when he joked about how all that running for Uruguay was going to be the death of him?
Classic Arrascaeta, always finding a way to make us laugh.
But it speaks to his dedication.
To his commitment.
He's willing to put in the work, even if it means playing a role that's not always, his ideal fit.
And that brings us to another interesting point. His decision to stay in South America.
Instead of going to Europe.
Right. Something that a lot of people wonder about.
Because he's clearly talented enough to play at the highest level in Europe.
Oh, absolutely no question about it.
But he's made it clear that he feels his style of play is better suited to South American soccer.
He talked about how there's maybe more emphasis on creativity and technical skills there.
Right. It's a different kind of football.
More flair, more improvisation.
And while he could probably adapt to the European game,
I'm sure he could.
He seems to feel a stronger connection to the South American style.
It's where he feels most at home.
And he also mentioned that he wasn't sure if he was mentally prepared for the challenges of adapting to a new culture in Europe.
Right. It's a big decision to move to a different continent.
To uproot your life.
And it's not something to be taken lightly.
And you know what? I respect him for being honest about that.
Me too.
For acknowledging that maybe he wasn't ready for that kind of change.
It takes a lot of self-awareness to admit that.
And it seems like he's really content with the decision he's made.
Yeah, he's not looking back with any regrets.
He's found a place where he feels valued, where he can be himself, where he's achieving great things.
And that's what matters.
It's not about chasing prestige or recognition.
It's about finding the right environment for you to thrive.
And I think that's something we can all relate to.
Absolutely.
It's not always about following the most obvious path.
It's about finding what truly fulfills you.
And for Arrascaeta, it seems like that's about connecting with something bigger than himself.
Being part of something special.
Being part of that mundo Flamengo.
That world that he's embraced so fully.
It's a world that shaped him.
And that he's helped to shape in return.
And it's a world that he's not ready to leave just yet.
So, yeah, I think it's been a really fascinating journey, hasn't it?
It has.
From those early days as a shy young player arriving in Brazil.
Yeah, who'd have thought he'd become the maestro of Flamengo?
And now he's evolving into this mentor, this leader.
And throughout it all, we've seen his vulnerability, his growth, his unwavering commitment.
And his deep connection to this world of football.
And what really strikes me is his self-awareness.
Yeah, he's so honest about his struggles, his doubts, his aspirations.
He's not trying to project a certain image.
He's just being himself.
And I think that's what makes him so relatable, so inspiring.
He's a reminder that even the most talented individuals face challenges.
And that growth and fulfillment come from embracing those challenges.
From being willing to learn and adapt.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of Giorgian De Arrascaeta, I think it's safe to say that his story is far from over.
He's still got a lot to give.
He's still evolving, still finding new ways to contribute, and still chasing those dreams that fuel his passion for the game.
And I think that's a great note to end on.
It is. So for everyone listening, we hope you enjoyed this deep dive into the world of Giorgian De Arrascaeta.
And we hope it's given you a new appreciation for this incredibly talented and complex individual.
Until next time, thanks for listening.